do much else that year. No, actually I did. This was also part of my intern year. I was part of a group that did a lot of data collection and statistics for looking at the timing of clexane in major abdominal surgery, and also the timing in major ventral hernia repair. And again, that was when I learned a lot about how hernia repairs are performed. I then started to do some case reports during my HMO 2 years. This was one that I did at Peter Mac. And I tried to do a systematic review on fertility preservation as well, but that didn't go anywhere either. And then as I become a registrar, I tried to write some case reports, but again, they didn't really go anywhere. And now I'm doing a systematic review. Essentially, the point of what I'm saying is you can do a lot of research and only, half of it might end up turning into a publication. And that can be due to a variety of reasons. It can be due to, supervisors not really, getting back to you or something like that. Or it can be because you get really busy, which happens particularly as you are trying to get on training programs and things like that. So my main thing that I would say to junior doctors and medical students is if you're interested in a certain thing, talk to people and see what you can do, and try and, figure out how surgical research is made, and how you can best be involved in this process. And as I said previously, it can actually help you learn a lot about, surgery in general and how things are done and technical skills that you need, or different techniques for a particular disease. So that's me. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Any questions from anyone?
We can take questions at the end of the Q&A. And this is just a chance to remind everyone, feel free to either type your question into the chat or into the Google form that we sent out earlier. I'll dig up the Google form link again and put it in the chat in a bit. But in the meantime, let's welcome William. Dr. William is a cardiothoracic surge registrar at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. His interest in research was sparked during the Melbourne Medical School MDRP program, in which he was an investigator for a randomized controlled trial analyzing methods of sternal closure. He has continued developing his research skills during his junior doctor training with presentations around the world and authorships in a variety of papers, including systematic reviews, case reports, and original studies. Let's welcome William.
Thanks, James. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Will. I'm one of the cardiac surgery registrars at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, and I've been asked to give a talk on research in the life of a surgical registrar. And in particular, some of the areas that I've been asked to address include what kinds of research that I get up to, and how and when research fits into my life, both from a timing point of view as well as what research generally means to me. I'd preface this by saying that this presentation may be a bit uncomfortable. I don't generally like talking about myself so much, but I hope you don't see this as me sort of summarizing or bragging about what I've done, but more take it as one approach and perspective on how research can play a role in your career as a clinician or otherwise. I am by no means an accomplished researcher, but I think the point is that most of you won't be at this point in your time, and this is just one of the journeys that you can take. So a little bit about me. As James mentioned, for me, research began in my final year of med school. I wasn't quite as enthusiastic or as prepared as Nat was, but yeah, I was involved in a randomized controlled trial looking at methods of sternal closure post-cardiac surgery. I was really lucky to be part of the Professor Royce's research group here at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. And they taught me pretty much everything I know about research at this point of my life. But importantly, what it did was spark a joy for research that I never thought I'd have. I'd never done any research before. I had no idea what it entailed or whether or not I'd like it. And from a purely experience point of view, it took me through my first experience in the process of research. from building a hypothesis to eventually performing a literature review to see what current evidence exists, writing up a methodology for it, eventually, various presentations. This is my poster presentation at the MD student conference as a final year. And then a variety of oral presentations. Again, one, the 3-minute talk at the MD student conference, which many of you will be familiar with, as well as one at the Royal Melbourne Research Week Symposium, where I was lucky enough to be given an award for that talk. Eventually, you have to actually turn that research into something, and this is my final monograph from that assessment. Because it was an RCT that takes several years to do, this was just an initial sort of pilot publication on the initial sort of half of the recruited patients at that point. Eventually, it did get published a couple of years later in the Interactive Cardiovascular and Thoracic Surgery Journal, and this was my first publication as third author. But as Nat said, you can't get started on these things and expect to be published, or and especially be first author on a lot of these things. That does take time to work towards. But for me, this was the beginning of it all, and something that I really enjoyed as we went through. To sort of understand how this all, and research in particular, fits into my life, this is sort of just a bit of an outline of what I've done to date. I started my internship in 2019, so I am 6 years out of med school, and I've been at the Royal Melbourne that whole time. I did a year of surgical residency, did a year as a general surgical and trauma registrar, did a year as thoracics, and these last couple of years I've been the cardiac surgery registrar here at the Royal Melbourne. But there's lots of things to being a doctor outside of your day-to-day pure work. As Nat has mentioned, these applying for set training takes up a lot of your mental and sort of actual time, and you need to think about these things. There's lots and lots of co-curricular activities within the unit, within the hospital. That's all part of being a doctor. So being involved in teaching, attending conferences and meetings. Further education is pretty much something that everyone that wants to apply for set training now has to do. So I have done a Master's of Surgery, and I'm in my final semester now of the Masters of Clinical Ultrasound. But you also need to think about life outside of work, and everyone structures their work-life balance differently. But for me, it's something that's really important. And that includes just the basics of being a functioning human adult that showers and cleans the house, does things. But on top of that, trying to exercise, have hobbies, catch up with your friends, go on holidays, plan a wedding. Apparently, is something that I'm doing. So how do we fit research into all of this? Well, I had to think about what it is exactly that I could tell you about this. And two things came to mind. One is that the reality is, I can't just tell you to be organized. That is something that is very personal to everyone. And the other thing is, I'd be lying if I said that, this is something that I try to do at every spare moment of my life, because it's just not how life works. So instead, I think I'll go through some of the structures and things that I think through when I'm trying to plan through, and as well as go through what areas of research there are, because it's not just the doing of research that I think is important for you to think about when you are working as a junior doctor. Because as many of you will know, this, thinking about clinical relevance is really important. Research helps us to improve our knowledge, and that's not just doing it, but you have to read up and be aware of the latest trials, because that informs our clinical practice and decision making. Of course, there is also performing research, which helps to increase the body of evidence, informs others. And from a personal point of view, the more you do, the more experience you'll build, the better at it you'll get. Personal interest is also important. I don't want to be deluded into thinking that everyone is interested in research, because that's just the nature of it. Some people really dislike it, but it is a part of being a modern day clinician and surgeon. And even if you don't like it, you've got to find a way to motivate yourself to at least be up to date and thinking about it. So what kind of things exist? So outside of actually doing research, journal clubs are really important. In our unit here, we do a journal club specific to cardiothoracics every single Friday morning. And it's important because that helps us to address topical clinical points and provide updates on the latest in the field. Teaching is, again, doctors are just expected to do that. As a resident, you'll often have to make presentations, and as a registrar, you have to give talks to residents and interns and medical students sometimes. And the journal clubs and sort of HMO teaching is sort of inverses of each other. Journal clubs, they look at papers, they analyze them, and then try to come up with inferences of how that will affect our clinical practice. Whereas teaching sort of goes in the other direction. That's why it's still really important, because all these things that we do on a daily basis, what medications to use, what doses to use, especially the further on you get, you can forget why you do those things. And that's why looking at this and saying, okay, what's the actual evidence for that is actually quite important. I put in brackets here publication subscriptions. This is not something that I personally do because I think it's not something that I can spend my time doing, but I have heard of people that have PubMed feeds where they put in searches and savings and save their settings and filters for areas they're interested in and read it like an Instagram feed somehow. And some people also just have journal subscriptions to major journals in their area of interest. Nat covered a little bit about courses. I just thought I'd mention, when I did the Masters of Surgery, I found it a really good opportunity to try and brush up on some various research skills. These are some of the subjects that are available, looking at research in particular. You have to do one of the top 3 subjects. I did clinical epidemiology. I also did the scientific communication for surgeons subject that looks at really basic stuff of like how to make a really effective presentation, what kind of things to think about when you're doing an oral presentation, and how to communicate effectively. I also did the translation and innovation subject that looks at how you can start with an idea and end up affecting surgical practice. And of course, you can do your research by dissertation as well. So your master's by dissertation, if you so choose. So what kind of research have I done? A whole sort of hodgepodge of various things, which you'll find is pretty common amongst registrars. I've done case reports. I've been reviewers for systematic reviews. I've written a review article on, the surgical practice in mesothelioma. I've even written a book chapter for lung cancer in this textbook on men's health. So yeah, there's lots of different things that you can do. Presentations wise, presentations are a great opportunity to travel the world and go on holidays as well while you're at it. So on the left here, this is me giving a talk a couple of years ago in Cairns about robotic thymectomies. And then last year I was in Wellington giving a talk on rib fixation in trauma. And this slide scared me because it reminded me of all the things that I have not been doing for the last few months. But this is the sort of set of projects that I'm currently working on. So everything is there. There's a systematic review looking at pulmonary carcinoid recurrence. I'm looking to write up that talk that I gave in Cairns on robotic thymectomies. There's a case report from a recent operation we did on an excision of a left ventricular thrombus. My MD research project has sort of reared its head again 6 years later, because there was a German surgeon that was interested in that study and wanted to know how they could repeat it. And obviously that's quite an important aspect of research. And I'm also working on a new randomized control trial in thoracic surgery, looking at sealants to prevent air leak or pneumothoraces post-lung resection. So when does this all happen? As I said, in some senses, some of it doesn't happen. And you have to be realistic about your availability. because there are a lot of opportunities out there, and you need to be prepared to say no. And this is part of your whole discussion with any supervisors that you might have. You need to understand what you can achieve, and when supervisors want things done, there's obviously a little bit of negotiation in there, but if you can't meet what the supervisor needs, you need to be upfront and honest with them about that. Okay. I put a special point in here to look at your set application requirements. Every specialty has their own set of requirements about what kind of research they want, what authorship you need to be. And this is really important for how you prioritize things. As I mentioned before, these top two things are more basic research, but things that I can get done and things that I can include on my CV ready for an application. Whereas my supervisors have been very understanding that this randomized controlled trial that takes years is not something that's going to be done straight away. But be aware that application requirements change, and that has happened to cardiothoracics this year quite drastically. So, all these different publications that I've done, they don't really count anymore. They just want one really high impact research now. So that's part of it. For me, I think it's really important to remind yourself that you as either as a medical student or as a junior doctor, that is your primary focus, if you so choose it to be. And I'm a strong believer in that if you do your job really well, that you will get opportunities based on that, and that if you try and spend your time doing research at the expense of your job, that will be obvious to people, and you just need to keep that in mind. In terms of the actual timing itself, as I said, I don't think this is something I can advise you specifically on. It's well and truly easy for me to say, be organized and set aside time. But I think all I'll say is that sacrifices do need to be made. And if no one's told you yet, surgical training can be grueling, especially as an unaccredited, where you are grinding to get things done. That talk I gave in Wellington last year meant that I had to miss one of my best friend's weddings for, and that's just how things are sometimes. And you've got to make some tricky decisions from here and there. Lastly, I just had a quick slide on some tips about getting involved. I remember being a medical student and hearing talks from people like Nat and thinking, my goodness, they're so accomplished and so they've done so much already. And that was never me. Like I said, my first research experience was the compulsory MD research project through the university that I had to do. And I have never been one to really seek out a lot of research. But what I realized is that there are lots and lots of opportunities for research. And my biggest tip is to actually speak to residents and registrars. I know everyone always thinks, I need to go to a consultant. They're the ones that run it. But actually, registrars are the ones that often are the ones sort of driving the research within units, because they need CV points and amongst other things. And as Nat mentioned, there's a lot of smaller things you have to do, a lot of data collection that you'll probably be involved in. It's a lot of grunt work, but the important thing is to take note of that research process, get a grip for that, because eventually it will be you needing to lead these things. And the last thing that I often heard as a medical student was that you need to come up with ideas for research projects and go to potential supervisors and run those ideas. I must say that's not something that I've ever done. I think more importantly is to look at the areas of interest for that potential supervisor, have a think about whether or not you share those interests, because most of these people already have studies in mind or that are in progress. So you don't often need to come up with your own ideas, but it can be helpful to do that. All right, that's it from me. There's my email if anyone wants to contact me and ask me any questions. Always happy to help out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoang. Very insightful presentation. I'd like to now just invite our third and final speaker, Dr. Erin Saricilar. Erin is a Set 2 vascular surgery trainee currently at Wollongong Hospital. He has an interest in complex aortic disease and medical education, for which he has completed 2 master degrees and is currently completing a PhD at Uppsala University in Sweden. He will also be attending the Uppsala University Hospital Complex Aortic Fellowship in 2025. He is also the Chief Medical Officer of Opus, which is a health tech startup in Sydney. He loves his dogs Merlin and Pippin.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me. So I was going to have a chat today about the journey to getting onto set training and how to embark on research in that journey. So mentioned I am currently set 2 at Wollongong Hospital, and will be taking a break in my training next year. So a bit about my journey. This is just a 1 page of my life post medical school. So I finished UNSW in 2018. I did my internship and residency in the deep end of the pool at Liverpool Hospital, where I learned a lot. I then did 2 years of unaccredited vascular surgery training at the Royal North Shore Hospital, which was one of the most seminal points in my training and helped me get on. So my first year in 2021, I actually did a part-time clinical job where part of my job was actually research specifically. And a lot of people frown upon doing part-time work, but I think it's essential to consider your limitations when it comes to your time commitment for research. And that's what I did. So I took on the part-time job. I've completed 2 full-time masters. I did them full-time. One was a Master's of Medicine in Clinical Epidemiology, and the second was a Master's of Surgery, where I did a dissertation in vascular and endovascular surgery. I personally support anyone in doing the Masters of Surgery with a dissertation for 2 reasons. Firstly, it forces you to complete research. And secondly, if you're thinking long-term here, having an MS with vascular/endovascular surgery after your name is very good when it comes to setting up practice one day. The GSSC is something you should never forget about. Try do it early, but don't do it so early that you neglect your internship. So I did mine in February as a resident. And then in 2022, I applied for training and got on. And as a congratulations, they sent me back to Liverpool Hospital. And now I'm at Wollongong, where I'm absolutely loving my life, having done over 250 primary cases myself. And it's the 3rd busiest vascular department in the country. I'm also a CLEAR instructor, so one of the courses provided by the college. CLEAR is excellent when it comes to learning very quickly how to do research, and some of the people you meet there will be seminal in your growth as a doctor. I've also started a PhD at Uppsala University in complex aortic dissections, where I'll also be doing the fellowship next year. When it comes to my research, I've got 12 first authorships, 1 Cochrane review, 2 book chapters. I was awarded Best Abstract at Charing Cross 2022, which is the largest aortic conference in the world. I'm a reviewer for the journal Vascular, which is a journal of Chicago surgeon Ross Milner, and I'm the co-founder and chief medical officer of Opus. And I have 2 dogs. These are my dogs. I love them with all my heart. That's Merlin, the big one, and Pippin, the small one. So when it comes to getting on to training, always set your expectations. Everyone has a different journey. Some people get on earlier, whilst others get on later. You aren't special if you get on early. And I think people who get on later often come in with a lot more experience and are a lot more prepared. And they cope much better in this surgical training program. And the most important thing is to enjoy the journey as you're progressing towards trying to get onto training and not burning out. A lot of people sacrifice a lot of things. I myself am included. I sacrificed a lot in my journey and have been very close to burning out many times. Recognizing it early is essential. any work that you do in that journey is good work. So don't think that you're wasting your time in certain places. So I know I have many friends who did an extra resident year before becoming an unaccredited registrar. And they're some of the best doctors I've met. Remember, you're a doctor first and foremost, and the more work that you do, the better you'll become. And don't neglect taking on part-time work. So you can focus on all of the other stuff that comes with being a doctor or trying to get onto set, which is research or other CV requirements. One of the things that I had to adjust in my own mind was I had to set my trajectory based on my own ambitions and not what I saw in others or what my family expected of me. So you set your own goals and set your own journey, and also set your expectations early. So when you set your goals, you need to ask yourself what kind of surgery you, not what kind of surgery you want to be, what kind of surgeon you want to be. Sorry for that. And so you need to find people around you that you respect and try to model the journey that they've had, and your journey based on what they've had and their experiences. Don't expect to get on first time. There are many great doctors that I know and some of my colleagues who got rejected the first time, and they absolutely deserve to get on, and they stayed, they were persistent. Seek out these kinds of people and seek out mentors. That's the people that will help guide you there are going to be your mentors. I often see a lot of people who want to become surgeons, but are trying to do the bare minimum. Surgery isn't a place of bare minimum. You need to learn to excel, and never just settle for what's good enough. Always try and be better. So even when it comes to set CV requirements, don't just settle for the bare minimum CV requirements. Always shoot higher, because people will appreciate that. And when it comes to the interview, I know it's meant to be impartial, and the interview is meant to, just be with certain criteria, but it isn't. And the interviewers do talk. The interviewers know you. They've seen you before. And so they will go in with that prejudice. So if you excel in your everyday, you'll excel in your interview. Before becoming a surgeon, you need to learn to be a physician. That's why your early years are so important. Surgeons shouldn't just be handymen. They should be physicians who know how to operate. And that's the kind of mindset you have to go in to this world. So when it comes to getting to set, there's certain stages you need to hit. As I said, do your GSSE early. You're never going to feel ready for your GSSE. I still, to this day, don't know how I made it through, because I never felt ready. So just do the work, set your practice appropriately, and then sit it. Do not delay it. I tell everyone, get at least one extra set of letters after your name. So whether it be an MS or an MM. Be careful though. If anyone's interested in plastics, the Masters of Surgery at the University of Sydney is no longer considered. And I absolutely see why, and I actually agree with what they've done. Unfortunately, it's no longer a differentiator for anyone. So try and differentiate yourself. Identify early on what needs to be accomplished in your CV, and then set a very clear timeline. So set up an Excel spreadsheet or set up goals that you need to hit, and make sure you hit the goals, and don't neglect the easy points. There's so many easy points there, such as attending conferences, etc. Just don't miss out on those, because rest assured the other candidates will have hit those. Don't miss submission dates. The costs, it's all very expensive, unfortunately. So be prepared for that and budget accordingly. Even just putting in an expression of interest will set you back nearly $1,000 to get onto training. And then you pay even more to sit the interview. And your plan needs to be multi-yeared. Make sure you're in communication with your colleagues about what's happening, but don't kind of listen to what they're doing. Everyone will talk themselves up, and they'll often talk themselves up in a way to try and bring others down. So kind of set your own mind to it. Keep on top of all the changes that are happening every year. RACS communicates nearly as well as a senior set registrar, which means they don't communicate at all. Just you need to be seeking out the information. It's sometimes deep in the pits of their terrible website. So make sure that you're leading the way. Now, getting involved with research, we've already talked a bit about how to get onto doing research projects, but I'll give you my opinion. Be very open-minded about the opportunities. You never know who's going to hold your hand moving forward. It may be an unaccredited registrar who'll want to help guide you because they just like you or they're that kind of person. Or it may be a consultant who just sees some opportunities in you. That's actually what happened to me. There was one consultant who I'm still in touch with and who's actually coming to my wedding later this year, who held my hand and guided me forward. And I don't know why she saw an opportunity in me. So you'll never know who would be that person for you. And also don't say no because it's not your area of interest. There's very few specialties where I would simply outright say, no, I'm not going to help you with this research. I'm involved in colorectal research at the moment just because I'm interested in it. In vascular, we've been known to perf the bowel. So having knowledge of that area, having knowledge of all other specialties is important. Don't be afraid of the magnitude of research. You can easily learn on the job. Trust me, if you have a question on how to do something, I'm sure someone else has asked a question and you're going to find the answer somewhere online, whether it be Stack Overflow or Reddit. On the point of seniors holding a hand, make sure you embrace the seniors who open doors for you no matter what they are, because the seniors are all connected and seniors will always communicate with each other. And one supportive senior counts for years of hard work. So that's another important thing to consider. Find seniors that have completed research, no longer wanting to lead data collection analysis. So that's me, for instance, I'm not interested anymore in doing that grunt work of data collection. And for me, I get more value out of training the next generation of junior doctors to do their own research. And often, I always say this, if someone is going to lead the data collection, write up the paper, they'll be the first author. And even if I'm the lead investigator, if they do the write-up, they'll be the first author. And make sure you find people that are willing to support you in that. So if you've got your own ideas, which you'll have in your journeys on your rotations, you'll have questions, and you should approach your seniors with your ideas. They may be able to help answer whether there's gaps in the data. And that's where you can then, embark on a certain type of research and set out the requirements that research project will have. And also when doing this, make sure that you're aware of the needs of your college. So there's certain colleges that are notorious in changing the goalposts. Plastics, look out. Cardiothoracics as well. All of that super specialized specialties will often change the goalposts and make your life hell. So just be on top of that. What types of research can you get involved with? So you can break it up into primary and secondary studies, and you should try and be a part of all of these. So primary studies, retrospective, prospective. They can be registries, case control, cohort studies. If you go to the CLEAR course, you'll learn a lot more about what these are. There's laboratory and translational research as well, and I strongly support everyone to do this. benchtop to bedside model of translational research will change your view of medical research altogether. So don't say no to something like that. And I recommend you take time to try and engage in something like that. Clinical trials are another thing you can be involved in. Certain units are more prevalent to clinical trials than others, so seek those out. An example is the Royal North Shore Hospital, where they do a lot of clinical trials. And at Wollongong Hospital, where I'm now working with the head of department to set up a clinical trial unit. Randomized controlled trials are a big job. And whilst I recommend people be involved with them to learn how they work, you're probably not going to get a lot of yield out of RCTs when it comes to your hitting your goals. Secondary studies are actually very high yield. Narrative reviews, scoping reviews, systematic reviews, and meta-analyses, they are very, very impactful. And they actually have the potential of changing medical care around the world. And they're quite easy to do when you understand how to do them, without burning too much time. 2 people can do it together with a 3rd person supervising easily. As an example, one of my meta-analyses on the optimal timing of thoracic endovascular aortic repairs in uncomplicated type B dissections has taken me around the world. It's taken me to London, Italy. It's taken me to Sweden, the Netherlands. I've presented in Japan remotely. It's been wonderful doing that. Leipzig as well. And it's made me faculty at Australia's largest vascular specific conference, VERV, in Sydney. So they are big jobs, but they're very, very high yield. Now, something that has been mentioned is actually red flags, and I'll be open with you on the red flags that you need to be aware of. People will try and exploit you. There's a lot of snakes out there who will exploit you being junior and make you do all the work for them getting all of the gain. So you need to set the rules early and have the rules written down. No handshake agreements. Email your supervisors with your colleague saying these are the rules. So if the rule is, for instance, you do the data collection and you do the write-up, you're first author, right? You set that rule. The next thing is don't embark on large multi-year data collection studies unless you're getting something out of it. Your 60-year-old, 70-year-old head of department is going to want you to collect the last 10 years of retrospective pulmonary embolism data for you. Okay. Which I am doing actually. I'm not, now that I'm on training, I don't really care about wasting that time because it is so important for our community to have this information. But as a junior, don't waste your time on this. You're not going to get anything out of it. If you say yes to it, you're just going to be stuck collecting data for someone more senior to get things out of it. Case reports. A lot of people like publishing case reports, but I don't think they're high yield. They're good to learn how to write up something, but you've been writing things up since high school. So I don't think they're particularly high yield. In fact, some colleges just, they don't give you books. They don't give you points for it. Don't let slackers join the team. You guys can easily find out who's a slacker. Don't let them be a part of the team when it comes to research because they're going to exploit you as well. Now, if you want, when you're doing the research and you're trying to get a certain answer, if you're good at statistics and you do your own statistics, which I recommend, I do all my own statistics, don't cook the books, okay? It's tempting to cook them and make them come out the way you want them to, but negative answers actually have clinical outcomes. So saying that a certain medication doesn't have a significant difference to management actually is a clinically applicable result. So that is publishable. People think that only positive results are publishable. That's completely untrue. Negative results change our clinical reasoning as well. On the point of slackers, also don't work with people that you know are too busy. Recognize their limitations, and if they're taking on too much work and you know that, don't work with them. On that point, tell your supervisors the truth of how much you can do. Don't say you can do this and not deliver. And I see it too many times. There's juniors that say, yeah, I'll do this. And then the weekend of the submission of a conference, you've got someone like me doing all the prep work for you. Okay. And it's happened too many times and I hate it. And as my bosses say, I'm too much of a nice guy and I just do it for them. You won't get people like that. So tell your supervisors if you can do the work. And if you can't, just don't. Just say the truth. I'm too busy, and they'll understand. I'm going to do a few quick things about the CV. Go to every conference that you can. You can tax deduct it, you can travel. And when you go to the conference, go to every single networking night there is. Okay. As conference is not for the presentations, it's for the networking. The people that go there, they all talk. The people that go to conferences are going to be your interviewers, right? And they're going to want to know about you and just talk to them. When it comes to CV, make a big spreadsheet of colors, however you like to do it. Make sure you hit every single mark. You don't want any surprises. Don't miss easy points. You're not guaranteed to get on, so maximize every single point that you can. And, you know, as I said, the rest of it all makes sense. Research is hard, so start early and don't do time sink projects. When it comes to referees, be careful who you include. You need a score of 100% to be competitive. Now, that means your interviewers need to lie in your referee report. So for the vascular referee report, there's a section there that asks, can this guy operate independently? The answer is no. Before I got on set, I couldn't operate independently. I was asking someone to join me for toe amputations, right? So they need to lie. So you need to specifically ask your referees if they're willing to give you a score of 100%. So realize that bosses that have really high upstanding morals that may like you are actually not good referees because they may not lie on the referee report. You want young bosses that have been through the system that know that the system's rigged. Okay. I have some information here for the interview. So make sure you get formal interview training. Once you get an interview, it could be the tipping point of getting on or not. And realize that there's going to be people with more experience. So your goal is to demonstrate your ability to work in a team environment. My recommendations don't emulate someone else's style. Develop your own interviewing style and you're going to be better. So be honest and give honest answers. At the end of it all, don't lose faith. It's not the end of the world if you don't get on. There's heaps of more training that you can do, get great experience. And unaccredited registrar time, it's a time without that much stress compared to being a set trainee. There's a lot more expectations when you're on set and it can be very hard. Most importantly, make time for your friends and family because they're number one and learn from your mistakes. And that's all I've got, guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Erin, for that presentation. It was very insightful. Now we'll just move to the portion of the presentation that is the Q&A from the audience. So the first question that we have is, would it be preferred for interns to do research partnered with the unit of the health service they are completing their internship in, or does it not really matter?
I might quickly hop in on that. I think it doesn't matter. It's definitely easier if you're working in a hospital that has an attached research department. So at the Liverpool Hospital, there was the Ingham Institute, for instance. Being there makes it easier, but you don't need to be there to do research. So for instance, I'm doing my PhD in Sweden and I'm sitting here in Sydney. The project itself is between New Zealand, Sydney, the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, and Uppsala University, and it can all be done remotely as long as you have people you can trust, and that have a track record of having delivered.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Just fielding the questions from the audience as well. So how should we conduct research if we're unsure about which specialty we aspire to train in?
Just do it. You may develop a love of a certain specialty if you're doing the research in that. Often people end up loving the things that they're good at. And if you, for instance, if you always wanted to do vascular, but you did heaps of research in upper GI and you suddenly start understanding how the science of it works, you may develop a passion in it. And don't be afraid of doing research in areas that you're not particularly interested in, because one day when you have a complication in that area, you're going to be interested in it. Okay, so don't be so focused on a certain specialty, particularly early in your days.
Yeah, that was me. I thought I wanted to be a physician. I just happened to be on a cardiothoracic rotation during med school, and that's where I met one of the bosses, and that's just how it all began, and I've been stuck ever since.
That's a shame. There's one question from the audience here with regards to first authorship. What criteria must be fulfilled precisely to be first author? It sort of depends on what the team decides. So for instance, we've got one project here in Wollongong where it's a world's first. So even though I'm writing up the project, my boss will be first author, and that's something that we've agreed on, because it is a world first, and she's going to be the one that's going to be defending our unit against a barrage of insults that are definitely going to come in from the Brits. So as long as you set the rules, whatever the rules are from the get-go, you get to be first author, and don't make sure it's all written down, because there are snakes that will try to take it from you.
Another question we have from the audience is, how important and cost effective is research in comparison to developing other skills for your CV?
What do you mean by that question? Are you talking about like how do you build your CV as a whole?
I think so. I think that's what they're after.
I think Will focused on it quite well, and Dr. Erin as well. I think it really depends on like what your set requirements are, and most of the time it will be a combination of research and teaching. And don't think you should put all your eggs in one basket, but research is a really important basket, so you can't ignore it either. It's one of those things that I was saying in the chat before. It's one of those things that you should try and do a little bit consistently, so it's not a little bit every so often, well, not regularly, then it should hopefully be something that you can achieve. And you can do that alongside when you're doing teaching as well. So teaching once a week, a bit of research once a week, you know, and just working at it slowly, and you will eventually get there, eventually.
Another question from the audience was, as medical students and junior doctors, how much time should we allocate to research?
That's hard to quantify, I think.
What you have going on, and what projects you have. It's the should part is probably the interesting part of this question, and I think you've heard from three reasonably varied people and how they've gone about it. And you know, it's up to you. And like I said, it's for most people, doing research is at the expense of something else. Yes, you might enjoy it still, but you know, you've got to think about what else you want to do in life. You know, internship is a really fun year, for example, and you don't have that much responsibility from a medical point of view. It's still a bit scary, but you might want to spend that time in enjoying and making the most of that, because after that things start to get a bit more real, and yeah, you don't want to miss out on enjoying those years as well. So it's all a balance, and yeah.
I think it's important to realize that this is a really, really long journey, and if you don't prioritize life now, then you'll never live your life, pretty much. So yeah, Will is right. It's definitely a balancing act. I'm one of those people that used to struggle with overcommitment and just like say yes to everything. And now I kind of realize that, my research commitments will ebb and flow depending on what else I'm doing. Like obviously when you're studying for the GSSC, you can't, you be spending a lot of time on research because you have other priorities. And it's the same if you have something big going on in your personal life as well. You kind of just have to look at things that are going on in your life and go, look, can I actually afford any more time? Is this actually achievable or not? And setting reasonable goals as well. And if you think that you're not sure whether you can complete it, try and figure out, how many hours a week do I usually spend on this? How many hours a week do I spend on that? How many hours a week do I want to spend doing, spending time with family and friends? And is that, when you add all those hours together, is it actually possible to fit that in a week? Or am I, saying yes to too many things?
We'll wrap up. Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
There's just another question in the chat here, directed at me. When I talk about part-time research, I mean part-time clinical load, part-time research, not full-time clinical load and part-time research. There's certain centers where you can do half the work, clinical work, which is what I recommend doing, so you can focus on the other things. When it comes to spending time with your dog, it's fine. It's really fine. I'm fortunate that I've got a really, I have a great partner who's usually works from home, but most of the time when she's not around or she's in another country because she works quite hard, I'm able to walk the dogs in the morning. I get home at a reasonable time to enjoy time with the boys, and it's not that hard. You just adapt to it. The trainee who was a Wollongong before me, he also had a dog. He had no issues. And we're the third busiest vascular unit in the country. How did I find the Masters of Clinical Epidemiology? I thought it was very fine. I actually, whilst working full-time, I did it full-time as well. So the workload wasn't that bad, and I learned a lot from it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Erin. We'll just ask one last question. Given that a few of the surgical specialties have recently changed their selection criteria, in particular for research, some specialties now only allow submission of one publication, and score is based on the journal impact factor, more focused on quality than quantity. What strategies would you recommend us to navigate this?
I'll answer that because I've obviously been thinking about this a lot. Like I said, the cardiothoracic training has very much changed to this. I think it's a really good change. I think what surgical colleges have been selecting for a lot of the time, really good PhD candidates and not necessarily really good surgical trainees. And so it's unfortunate for people that have been spending all their time playing the previous rules to have it changed on you like that. But you sort of look at it and you can see why they've done it, and it makes sense. In terms of how to address that, I don't think it really changes anything. I don't think people go into research thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna, it stops people from trying to push out a lot of dodgy, terrible, small bits of research, which I must say is plentiful out there. you go to a lot of conferences and you'll realize that they're mostly unaccredited registrars pumping out some pretty low effort research. But yeah, I mean, the way to plan around that is to really think about, you know, what journals give you what points. The cardiothoracic, to get the full 3 points for a presentation for a research study, now requires you to publish in one of NEJM, Lancet, or Nature, which is not really achievable for most people as a first author. So that's you know, you just have to be realistic about that, and have a think. And I think the biggest thing is, especially when you are an unaccredited registrar, is to really talk to your supervisors and your consultants, your mentors, and be like, hey, these are what the current criteria are. What can we do to try and work towards something like that? And that's true for most of your set training, not just in research. Going through the criteria with your boss and saying, these are the things that I need to do, whether that's, you know, procedures or otherwise, is a really important thing to go through.
All right, we might wrap up there. Thank you again to Dr. Natalie, Dr. Will, and Dr. Erin for sharing your valuable time and insight with us. And thank you for everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
For the rest of your evenings. Bye.